Welcome again, everybody, to this second Sanskrit class, Introducing Sanskrit. And as you know, we're on the Bodhisattva on the chapter 7, Diligence. And James will carry on, but he has asked that if you could possibly put some questions to him in between classes, because it is quite difficult using the chat line while the talk is going on. I, for one, don't really like writing questions in because I'm missing what's actually being said. But please do use the chat because there haven't been that many questions that have come in between the class. Now, the way to get onto the class is when you go onto the website and you'll see there's a login sign on the top right-hand corner. You go into that login on the Buddhist Society website, and then you'll get my menu. And it comes up with my courses and classes, Introducing Sanskrit, and then it'll say teaching resources. But there will at some point be a thing coming up saying Q&A. Yeah. So with that Q&A, you put in some questions. It doesn't matter if your questions are extremely elementary. It doesn't matter at all, because there will be fellows who will be just at the same level as you and who will want that question answered. You know, people are often very shy to ask questions. Or they may think, oh, it's all too complicated. I couldn't possibly ask such a silly question. But please ask any question. James will be too delighted to answer them. But I don't want to go on and on. Pass over to James. James, thank you once again.
Okay, thank
I loved
you all.
your first class, and I'm really looking forward to this one. Thank you, James.
Right, thank you very much, Desmond. Yeah, I do emphasize that. Everyone, I often find, I mean, the Pali classes I've been running for a couple of years now, that written questions that come in between classes are often the most useful ones, because I have time to prepare an answer, and frequently they're questions that other people would have asked if they'd thought of asking them. So, I'm glad somebody else asked that question. So it is very, very valuable. I've just remember that when questions come in via the chat box during the live session now, I don't see them. There'll just be some will be picked up towards the end and repeated to me, but I don't actually see them. So, nor are they there on the recorded version. So anything that comes into the chat box, I'll likely never see, though I might hear it. Anything coming into the proper question and answer forum, I will see, and I will be able to devote. I'll be delighted to devote some time to answering. There were two questions that one actually from the chat box last time round, which I promised I'd look into, and that was whether our word, or the Latin word virgo, in English virgin, and the Sanskrit vira and the Latin vir had any connection with each other. I did check, and as one might kind of expect, the answer was no. It's from an ancient Indo-European root that I cannot find in Sanskrit, though we have it something a vera or a vira in Latin, an ancient root that not used in classical Latin, cognate oddly enough with the English word girl, and when you trace back, you will find an ancient Germanic root, but common with Latin as well. So sorry, chaps, no connection between those two. Another question that came to me via a separate source was somebody saying, why do you say that the Bodhicharyavatara says, without vigor there is no merit, when in fact it says without merit there is no vigor? Aha, now this is vitally important. I'm just going to share my screen now. Hopefully I can do it properly. Share screen from screen 3. These words that we did last time, nahi, I'll highlight them, nahi viryam vina punyam. And the question I received was, viryam is the word meaning energy, vigor, effort, right? vina means without, and punyam means, for want of a better word for the time being, merit. Well, yes, viryam is energy, vigor, vina is without, and punyam is merit. But please bear in mind that vina here is not a preposition, it is a postposition. In other words, it's tied to the word before it. So if we break this up, it would be well, nahi, there is not. Sorry, my highlighting, my cursor's going a bit. Nahi, there is not. Punyam, there is no punyam, there is no merit. Viryam vina. Note that the vina is a postposition, not a preposition. In other words, it does mean without, but it comes after the word it refers to. So viryam vina means without virya, without vigor. And it takes, you haven't done much grammar yet, though some of you have, I know. It takes mostly the accusative and sometimes the instrumental. Now look at the second half of this verse, which I'm highlighting. Yatha, as vayum vina gati. Just as, and the nahi applies to both, just as there is no gati in the nominative vayum vina, without wind. If I can just now share my other screen. Okay, this is mostly meant to be exposure to a Sanskrit text, but I've got to give you a little bit of grammar here. It's the point that an accusative, nominatives are different from accusatives in the masculine and feminine, but in the neuter, the nominative is always the same as the accusative. Same in Latin, same in Greek, same in Slavonic languages. So where you get viryam is a neuter noun, stem form virya, masculine, sorry, nominative and accusative viryam. Punyam is also a neuter noun, so the nominative and the accusative punyam. Now, if you look at vayu, and gati, I put these both in the nominative form. Now, when vayu, as we know, means wind. If you want to say without wind, that goes into the accusative. Vayum vina. Don't worry yet about these endings. You'll be getting those in September when we start the proper formal language course. So if I go back now to the text here, you'll see I'm highlighting vayum vina. That is the accusative, which it should have a subdotted M there. Now, vayum vina means without, there's no motion without wind. So that's a vitally important point to bear in mind, that in Sanskrit and in Pali, occasionally some words are prepositions, as in English, they come before the word that they govern, but much more commonly they're postpositions as here. So read viryam vina, without vigor, as one unit, and just as you read vayum vina, without wind. Yatha, as gati, motion, vayum vina, without wind. And one other point I want to mention before we get on, if you see where I'm highlighting here, sorry, typo, that should be a subdotted S there. Kshamate. Right, let us now go onto the text, proceeding from where we were last time. Well, I'll read the entire verse out first again slowly. Evam kshamo bhajed viryam virye bodhiryata sthita Nahi viryam vina punyam yatha vayum vina gatihi. Now this root ksham that we looked at last time, as I emphasized from last time, evam kshamo. Evam means thus, as in evam maya sutam, or in Pali, evam maya shrutam in Sanskrit. Thus, referring to something that's gone before. So the very first word of chapter 7, evam, refers back to chapter 6. So kshamo, chapter 6 is about kshanti. So evam kshamo bhajed viryam, being patient or having kshama, having kshanti in this way, forbearance, non-resistance. Bhajed viryam, let him cultivate viryam. Yata, because bodhi, sthita, because enlightenment, awakening, is sthita, literally stood, virye. Virye, by the way, is the locative. So viryam is the nominative and accusative. Virye means in virya. Bhajed viryam, let him cultivate viryam, virya. Virye buddhiryata sthita, because bodhi, awakening, is stood, literally stood, or rooted in, dependent on virya, energy or vigor. Right, now, that should wind up verse 1. We now go on to verse 2. So when I was doing the recorded version of this one, which is on the YouTube channel, I think I was having a brainstorm at the end of a long day, and for some reason, I instead of saying Kushala, I was saying Kutsala, no doubt with my mind influenced by what is a kuts in the next line. So sorry about that, chaps. It should be Kushalotsaha. So I'll read it now properly. Kim viryam Kushalotsahas tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita sakti vishadatmavamanyana. I'll read it once more slowly. Kim viryam kushalotsahas tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita sakti vishadatmavamanyana. So kim just means what. And by the way, it will take the same gender as the word that follows. So kim, which is neuter here. So kim viryam, just what is virya? So this is really helpful for us now, because instead of faffing about, is this translation best, is that translation best, he now gives a proper definition of exactly what he's talking about. So Kushalotsahas, it would be, if you see where I'm highlighting here, utsaha, ending with the subdotted H, the visarga, but it becomes an S there because of the following T. So I mean, a slight quandary here, how much grammar to give you, because this is rather experimental. We're dropping you straight into an authentic Sanskrit text. Some of you won't have done the grammar yet. Just bear with me and hang on. Anything that might appear puzzling will become crystal clear, hopefully, for those who attend what is likely, what I hope will be a good long series of sessions starting in September. So when you see the word ending in utsaha with an H with a dot under there and utsahas there, actually a lot of you, I bet that every one of you knows that rule without knowing that you know it. Let me try and prove that point. So can you see my iPad now, or have I mucked it up again?
Yes, it's fine. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. The rule that you know, we have the root nam, which means to bend. And by extension, it means to bend the body. In other words, to bow to somebody, to show respect and reverence towards them. And it makes a verbal noun, namas, or namah, in its isolated form. The word on its own, namah. It literally means a bending, a bowing. Namah. And one Sanskrit greeting is Namo Namaha, which is just saying Namah twice over. But when it's followed by a T, that subdotted H becomes an S. And that's why the T, meaning to thee, to you, becomes Namaste. So the root about the subdotted H becoming an S before a T. So I strongly suspect that most of you knew the expression Namaste. That's because Namah, the of Namah, becomes an S before a T. That's what you're seeing here with Kim Viryam Kutsalo Sahastad is with an S because it's followed by a tad. But back to the vocabulary. Let me just get back to the Word document, hopefully. Sorry, this is the techno dunce asking again. Have you got the proper thing on screen now? The TypeScript.
Yep.
Good, thanks. Kim Viryam, what is this virya that we're talking about? Kushalotsaha in its isolated form, which is a combination of two words, kushala and utsaha. Kushala, those of you who, it's one of the most common words in Pali, the kusala, it's pronounced in Pali, but with effectively the same meaning as in Sanskrit. And it has come to have a very specialized meaning among the Buddhists, both in Sanskrit and in Pali. In Sanskrit, this word kushala is a very broad and general word meaning good or right. So kushalante, you were right. In Buddhist usage, it's sometimes translated as skillful and sometimes translated as wholesome. And I've been asked sometimes, well, which is the best translation, skillful or wholesome? The answer is, it is both. It is good in the sense of that which is useful and beneficial for somebody who's on the magga, or Sanskrit marga, on the marga, on the path, that which helps you along the path. So you can have skillful means, which is kushalopaya. Kushala upaya. And by these vowels coalesce, become kushalopaya. That's often translated as skillful means, like means of meditation, means of teaching. Skilled, the Buddha has his kushalopaya, his skillful means in his teaching, but also an act having a moral tone might be described in English as a wholesome act, but it's that same word kushala. So don't fasten on the translation. Is it wholesome? Doesn't mean wholesome, doesn't mean skillful. It means anything that helps you along the path. And sometimes in English, it might be more appropriate to use one word. Sometimes it might be more appropriate to use another. So kushalotsaha, kim viryam, what is virya? It's the kushalotsahas, it's the utsaha to do what is kushala, the utsaha towards the kushala. Now utsaha, the root sa, the basic meaning of that root sa, from which you get utsaha, the basic meaning is prevailing or being victorious, or successfully overcoming some adversity or obstacle. That's the basic meaning behind it. And it's the same meaning as in the German root, the German word Sieg, meaning victory. And in Icelandic, modern Icelandic, Sigur is victory. We had in Old English, but no longer now, the word Sieger, meaning victory, directly cognate with the German, from Sach. The idea is you have fought, not necessarily a hostile fight, but you have put forth effort to overcome an obstacle. Saha. Now, the ut is a verbal prefix with the meaning, it's cognate with our English out, but it tends to mean up or up and out. So the idea is, if you just try and sense the feel of this word, sah, putting forth the effort to overcome an obstacle, and then the utsa, some sense of movement coming up. It's stirring yourself up to do something, to overcome an obstacle. And partly here the obstacle of sloth, of wasting your time thinking you're doing something useful. Ringu Tulku Rinpoche gave that beautifully, I thought, when he gave his talk on this chapter. So often we're thinking we're doing something useful, pretending to be busy, wasting our lives in things that don't really matter. Checking your emails for the 100th time that day, thinking that you're working. In fact, you're wasting time doing what's a bit too easy. So that here, the endeavor to do what is skillful, Ringu Tulku was on that very point, the Kushala, the endeavor to do what is skillful / wholesome. But the emphasis here is on utsaha. A bit of energy has to be put forth. Tadvipaksha ka uchyate. Vipaksha. I'll highlight the word here. So if I can find my cursor, here we are. Sorry, I'm having a problem with my cursor isn't behaving itself. Vipaksha. It means the opposite of something. It's counterpart. Let me just take you to my, so utsaha, the effort. So paksha, the word paksha means a wing. The prefix vi very often has the meaning of separation or out or apart or opposite. Or it can have the meaning of penetration as well, like our favorite word vipassana. Passana on its own just means seeing, pashyana in Sanskrit. Vipashyana, pashyana seeing, vipashyana means truly seeing into it, seeing through it. That's why it's called insight, seeing into or through. Vipaksha, the vi here has the meaning of something opposite, separated from. So paksha, the wing, the vipaksha, the opposite wing, the other side of it, the opposing faction. In fact, our English word from the Latin, faction, is the same as a paksha here. It's like the opposing side. You're divided into factions. So what is the vipaksha? What is the opposite faction? In other words, just means the opposite in meaning. So tad vipaksha ka uchyate. What is it called? There's so much grammar in that little word uchyate. I'll pass over it now. It just means what literally what is said. What is it said? Which means what is it called? Now he goes on to define the opposite of virya. It's alasyam. oops, sorry, we are on the right one. Alasyam. So stem form alasya, nominative alasyam. So it's translated often as sloth or laziness. There's actually the root las, which means to make, to shine or glint, and then by extension to make a movement, to be lively. And it has the adjectival form lesser, meaning lively, making movements, and you put the negating a in front of it, which is exactly the same as the Greek negating a, meaning non. So alasa means not making any movement, just not stirring yourself, not looking lively. So you can make now from this adjective alasa, you can make an abstract noun by strengthening the first vowel and putting a to ya. So alasya is the abstract noun form of alasa. I should mention to those who might be groaning, oh, have we got to learn all this? Well, kind of yes. However, when we do the formal methodical grammar class starting in September, you'll be taken through it all in a very formal, methodical way, and hopefully you will see the symphonic beauty and harmony of Sanskrit grammar. It may not appear to you now because I'm having to give you bits and pieces from here and there, because we've dived straight into an authentic text. But as time goes on, you will see it growing organically, this beautiful harmony of grammar. So anyway, this is one way that you make an abstract noun from an adjective alasa, alasya, built up from the root. Also, another thing I'd mention, in case you think, oh, there's a huge amount of grammar to be learnt in Sanskrit. Well, actually, yes, there is a fair bit of grammar to be learnt, but there's a lot of upfront learning. Once you've done that upfront learning, the grammar tends to be so regular that you get over that hump, and then you flow into the language, because there's a lot of it, but it's so regular and mostly predictable that once you've got it for all time. You don't have the numerous irregularities of many modern languages. So alasyam, so it's the vipaksha of viryam. So kim viryam, what is virya? Kushalotsaha, kushalotsaha, stirring yourself, and upsaha, stirring yourself to what is kushala. Tad vipaksha, tad vipaksha, its opposite, kauchite, what is its opposite called? Alasyam. So we have this alasyam, laziness or sloth. And now some further words have been brought in, all of which are defining what Shantideva means by alasyam, or the opposite, I should say, the opposite of virya. Kutsita sakti. The kutsita asakti. Kutsita, anything that's kind of base or low or vile. And asakti means clinging to. So vile clinging means clinging to what is vile. Vishadat atmava manyana. The root sad cognate with our English sit and set and saddle, and Latin sedere, from which we get session, sessio, a sitting. Sad means to sit, but also it has the meaning of failing to stand. In other words, collapsing, going to pieces. Now look at this now, vishada. Vishada here, despondency, but we've got our same prefix vi that we discussed a moment ago. You make a verbal noun out of it by just lengthening the A, so visarga. There's a dot under the N, under the S, for another grammatical reason that will become clear to you as we go along. So vishada, the idea is mentally going to pieces. Just you don't believe that you can do it. So vishada. At the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, those of you who know it, when Arjuna got into a terrible state of having to do battle against his relatives. That first chapter is the Arjuna Vishada yoga, the yoga of the Vishada of Arjuna. He became mentally incapable of doing anything. His limbs trembled, his bow fell from his hand. He was in a state of Vishada. So what you're being encouraged to do here, and even more in the next word, Atmavamanyana, is just not to allow these feelings, I can't do it, I'll never cut it, I'll never make it. That is specifically the opposite of virya. So the answer is, however despondent you feel, that is the very moment to arouse virya, the sense of, yes, you can do it. Now look at this lovely word here. Sorry, Atmavamanyana at the end of this verse. And you may not know it yet, but you will in a moment. You already know this word from numerous other sources. That's one of the joys of Sanskrit. You see this word, what does that mean? If you analyze it, oh yes, I knew all that before. Okay, Atmavamanyana. Atma avamanyana. You all know the word Atma, the Atman, particularly in Hinduism, and in Pali it's the Atta. It means the self. The Atma in the nominative form, and Atta in Pali, and in fact, look, Anatta. We all know Anatta, non-self. It's from the Sanskrit Atma. Avamanyana. We ought to have that word, and if you translate it literally into English, it's off-minding. Of a root man. Cognate with our English word mind, and the Latin word mens, mental. And also, actually, if it looks like our English word man, that's not a coincidence either, because the idea is man as in mankind being the thinking animal, the animal that has the power of thought, so that man and mind, no coincidence is the M and N. Now, ava is a prefix meaning it's actually directly cognate with our English word off, ava, off. It's the same word, just off. When we're using our English word off, it's a reflection from thousands of years ago when they said ava, off, not too far away. So avaman literally to off mind. In other words, to form an opinion that casts them off. Belittling, to hold in contempt. And the verbal noun, manyana. Manyana is like minding, thinking, treating, forming an opinion of something. Avamanyana, literally off-minding, holding in contempt, atma avamanyana, self-contempt, holding yourself in contempt, having the feeling, I can't do it, I'm no good. That is atma avamanyana. And by sandhi, which those of you who stay with the grammar classes will be learning quite a lot about sandhi, the atma avamanyana, the two R's coalesce, so atma avamanyana. Oops, sorry. Scholars will often write that helpfully as oops with a circumflex, just to indicate that two vowels are coalescing. Don't worry about that yet. So atmavamanyana, self-down-minding, in other words, self-contempt. So I'll just read this verse to you again, very slowly, and try and follow it as I read. Kim viryam kushalutsahas tadvipaksha ka uchyate alasyam kutsita sakti vishadatmavamanyana. So vishadatmavamanyana is vishada and atma avamanyana, coalescing into vishadatmavamanyana. So that brings us to the end of verse 2. Can I ask the administrative team, have there any questions come into the chat box?
I'm just having a look.
Not yet, James. They can fire away, though.
If there weren't such a huge number of you, I'd be able to ask you individually what your understanding of things is. With the large number, I'm afraid that luxury isn't available to us.
Would you comment on the semantic difference between translating viryam as vigor versus diligence, as in Padmakara translation, vigor, seems to more energize or animate the term? From Kenneth.
Yeah, that brings us back to the point that you'll all hear me. Those of you who know me from the last couple of years have heard me say it more than once, and I will say it. I won't apologize for carrying on. That these words that we use in English, they will capture part of this concept, but not the whole of it. No one word is going to capture the whole of what is meant by virya, particularly as it's used by Shantideva. So which word are we going to use? You could lump them all into one, vigor, energy, effort. Vigor, yes, and vigor is one word that you could use. In fact, vigor, lovely word. Look at this. It's from there's a Latin word, vigere. You know, to make a bit of an effort, make a quick movement. As the old Sanskrit Vedic vij, and that makes the noun vega. You often find that with a root with a j, you get a g in the verbal noun. You know it already. Yoga, for example. Okay, vega. So vega, we have some vega which again we have in the Buddhist text, samvega. This word identical in Sanskrit and Pali. Samvega means the sense of urgency. So from this same root vig, we get the English word quick, with its double meaning, quick meaning fast, making quick movements, for example, and the older English meaning, the quick and the dead, meaning the living and the dead. And still in Yorkshire dialect, I won't try and produce the Yorkshire accent in case any Yorkshire people here, but look wick about it. You were right, wick about that. Wick in the sense of quick. It's just a Yorkshire variation of quick, meaning quick and lively. Incidentally, also the no accident, the wick of a candle. It's the live part of the candle. So when we talk about the wick of a candle, we're using, now we see where it comes from, the Proto-Indo-European root vidju, vig, and samvega, the sense of urgency. So, okay, so let's now look at this word vigor. Desmond asked, is vigor a good word to use? Well, yes, but now look at all the ramifications of the word vigor. When we use this word in modern English, I would suspect that most people tend not to be aware of the Latin vigere and of the Vedic root vig and the samvega and the quick and the wick, but it's all these things rolled into one. And the point I'm trying to make here is that when Shantideva was using that word virya, he would have had a huge range of meaning within his mind, that anything that is the opposite of being despondent, lazy, slothful, wasting your time, thinking you can't do it. The opposite of all that is virya. This particular verse is very unusual and helpful because very, very often in scriptures, in Buddhist scriptures and in other scriptures, you get a particular word being used, a word that is of vital importance to understand. But here, Shantideva, speaking now as a lawyer, Shantideva has just done the thing that all lawyers love. He's used an important word, but then he goes straight into defining the terms. He's saying exactly what he means when he uses this word. So if we look at verse 2, he's defining in everything that he means when he's talking about virya. Look at all the things now he's saying. Kushala, bestirring yourself to do what's wholesome / skillful. The opposite of alasyam, sloth. Kutsita sakti, clinging to what is useless or vile. Vishada, despondency. Atmava manyana, thinking yourself down, just persuading yourself that you can't do it. So is there one English word that captures all that? There just isn't. That's why the only good translation is a heavily annotated translation. And the only real way to find out what Shantideva really meant when he used the word virya is to look right into the Sanskrit and the roots of the Sanskrit, which is precisely what you're all doing and what you're here for. So don't say, what's the translation? Set aside the translation, really feel into the Sanskrit, and hopefully now, with nearly an hour into this class, with having looked into these words and their roots and what they feel like, now we have a better meaning of what he's talking about when he says virya. And hopefully also we'll say, well, what's the translation? Well, there ain't really a translation. There is certainly not a single word translation.
That's incredibly useful, and you make a really good point on that, James.
Thank you.
Yes, because those words just come on over and over and over again, don't they? They're used in different ways. So it's so useful to find it in those terms. There's a question here in the word Vishadatma or Rama Manyana. What is yana?
Vishadat Atmavamanyana.
That's yes,
Sorry.
correct. Thank you.
I'm not going to blame you totally because I just got a bit tongue-tied. Vishadat Mavamanyana. Okay, let me explain. We have the root, I gave the root man. It is, again, a bit more grammar. You'll get used to this. It's a word that makes its present tense man, with inserting a ya, manyati, like from pash. Pashyati. By the way, whenever I go down these little rabbit holes and give you these other words, I will do my very best to keep my promise to you that no words that I'll be giving to you here are useless. These are all words that you will be finding again and again. So pashyati. In Pali, the pashyati becomes passati, means he sees. Pashyati, he sees. It adds the ya, it adds this ya into the declensional basis. It's not manati, manyati. And it forms a verbal noun. There are several ways of forming a verbal noun. That just means the to do, and the noun is doing. So one way of forming the verbal noun is by adding the suffix ana to it. So thinking, root man, add the ya in it, and add the suffix. You have manyana. Pashyana, seeing. And with our prefix vi, seeing into vipashyana, which in Pali, by standard phonetic mutation, becomes the word we all know, vipassana. So it's that ana ending, mean the act of doing something. So manyana, thinking, and with the prefix, verbal prefix, ava manyana, thinking down. And with the word vishada in front of it, they are two separate words, entirely separate words, vishada and atmavamanyana. They're just joined together because it's made into one long compound word here, but they are separate words. So we have vishada, despondency, atma avamanyana, literally self down thinking yourself down. So in ordinary modern English, we'd say something like self-contempt. But I find it useful, and I always have, to translate even into something that sounds like very clumsy English, because you get a flavor of how the word sounded to the native speakers of these languages 2,500 years ago. Atmavamanyana, with self down thinking oneself. So hopefully that has explained the answer to the, or given the answer to the question that came in. And if any of my answers aren't adequate, please do feel totally free to repeat it in the text box, though I can't see it, and more especially if you can to send in a written question to the question and answer page.
Well, there is a question here, but you've already answered it. But I will, for the sake of the questioner, just repeat it.
Please.
Mañana is similar to Spanish word for tomorrow. So I'll get round to it.
Yeah, in fact, it is similar. In the mañana, In Sanskrit, the n and the y are here two entirely separate consonants and written as separate consonants as well. Manyana. In Pali, it would become that so that manyana would be in Pali. The similarity to manyana is entirely coincidental. There is no connection between those two words at all. Sorry to say. Would be wonderful if there were. I suppose here mañana is you're constantly thinking about doing it, but never quite doing it. So mañana, 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 you see. I just spotted that. Yeah, mañana, thinking about it, never quite doing it. Mañana for mañana. That's a nice one. However, as a linguist and a scholar, I regret that I cannot give you any scholarly link between those words.
Well, there's a last question, the final question here,
Please.
James. And can you point us to a textbook we could use to read up on the language and start on the grammar and the Devanagari script?
Yes, I certainly can. In fact, I've got links to them. What I'll do, I've already I've prepared a sheet, which I know I've sent to Odin. What I will do, I've got a resources sheet. There are links to books. I'm in the course that I'm just going to finalize this with the team at the Buddhist Society about the textbook we'll be using. I'm proposing to use one by Thomas Eganes. So, Thomas Eganes, Introduction to Sanskrit, which is, it takes you through very slowly and clearly. Nothing is left behind. You've got methodical exercises, and that's the textbook that, you know, subject to any further discussion there may be, that I'm proposing to go through with you starting in September. I have already done YouTube videos of the first 2 lessons in that book. Hopefully I'll get through quite a few more over the summer break. So what I will do, I will send you that, I will send you the links. I'll send them to Odin, who can then put them up on the appropriate page or email them to the group. Now, this Thomas Eganes book, Introduction to Sanskrit, it's available on Amazon. It's fairly cheap, just a simple paperback. Thomas Eganes is also available. It's been made available by there's a free PDF download for it. Again, I'll send you the link for that. There will be links to other books as well. There's the wonderful old Macdonnell Sanskrit grammar, kind of written towards the end of the Victorian era, but still beautifully clear. Anyway, all of this will be in the links that I will send to Odin. So those of you who want to start mugging up the grammar before we start our lessons hopefully in September, we'll be able to do so from a little bit later today. I'll send it all to Odin. It's, by the way, whoever asked that question, it's music to my ears that people actually want to get down to the grammar. Everyone will be welcome in the class, but most especially those who say, I want to get onto the grammar in advance. Tell me how to do it. Make a note of the person who asked that question, Desmond.
A good example of vigor, isn't it?
A good example of virya. Yes.
Virya, yes, exactly.
There's some kushalotsaha, the utsaha, getting on with kushala, what is skillful and beneficial and wholesome.
Well, yeah, James, thank you very much for a wonderful class.
Right,
maybe I'll just refresh the minds of those of you who are not techie. You go to the top right-hand corner of the screen, the Buddhist Society website, and where you log in, and then you'll see a menu coming down. And then you go to My Courses, and then you go to Introducing Sanskrit, and then Teaching Resources, and then you should find it all in there, including questions and answers, Q&A. So James, thank you so much for
Thank
a
you,
wonderful
Desmond.
class.
Thank you
I've
all.
learned a lot today about that word, virya. I hope I can remember it. So go over your thing. It's recorded. And it's been really very, very helpful and enjoyable, extremely
Oh,
enjoyable. So thank you,
thank you very
James.
much, Desmond.
And next week, we'll be on the last of the 3 classes. So thank you very much, James. And thank you also, audience, for coming and
Good.
joining in this class. It's such a pleasure to see you all, and lovely to be studying together with others.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much indeed to you all. And I look forward very much to rejoining you in a week's time. And as I say, I will send those links to Odin, who can then send out a group email.
Lovely. Thank you, James.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you. Goodbye.